All right. Well, Jeremy, thank you for joining me on the ODAT Chad podcast.
Absolutely, Arlena. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
I've been wanting to get you on here for a really long time. I've known you for, several years now, and I know you from meetings, air quotes, on a podcast, but you always have such a strong message. And we have several things in common, not the least of which is our wedding anniversary date coming up here,
Yep.
September 20th.
Yes.
Yeah, but I just thought it'd be great to get your perspective on recovery. You're an executive in the Silicon Valley. We won't name any names, but yeah, I just have lots of questions about what life is like, sort of at the, can I say, upper echelons of management in really big companies, like
Sure. Yeah.
you a badass. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just curious how you manage all that. But before we jump into like the question and answer portion, you have an amazing story, and I have one story in particular that I requested you share. So I just figured I'd give you, 20, 30 minutes to get into your story, and then we'll get
Yeah.
into some Q&A.
Absolutely. Well, like I said, it's always a lot of fun to talk with you, Arlena. You and your husband have become really close friends of mine over the years, and yeah, we've known each other since '09. Now is when I moved up to the Valley,
Wow.
and then of course you broke my heart when you guys left, but
I'm so sorry.
obviously with platforms like this, we can still stay in contact, which is great. So yeah, I was born, and I like to jokingly say in the mean streets of Newport Beach. So down in
Right.
Southern California is where I was born. Interesting background for sure, though. My uh, mother was a teenage mom when she had me. She was 17 years old, and then a father who was 20, and uh, definitely a different time. This is in the 70s, 1970s when I was born, and so a lot of things going on, right? Teenage pregnancies, especially in a community like Newport Beach, was not looked on favorably. But even given all the things going on, my mom obviously decided to go through with the pregnancy, and so I came into this world, and it was an interesting thing because there's a lot of debate sometimes about nature versus nurture and the whole predisposition to genetics for alcoholism and propensity to be an alcoholic. For me, it was definitely a double whammy of both. I absolutely was predisposed. My father was an alcoholic. His father was an alcoholic. My grandmother was an alcoholic. Just up and down both sides of the family, a lot of alcoholism and drug addiction, a lot of depression, a lot of just, mental illness, and these types of diseases that, I think contributed a lot to where I was today. Now, obviously, I had a huge part in this because a lot of the disease of alcoholism is, choice, right, at first, and then that power of choice is taken away from us at some point. But for me, as I look back now, growing up, I had so many of the um, fears and anxieties and just all the things that go along with alcoholism. But ever before I even took a drink or any type of drug to make me feel different, and then you compound that with um, uh, a mother and a father that just weren't emotionally equipped to raise a child at that age, and then they split up at a very when I was like 3 or 4, and then my mom was trying to finish school, and to her credit, she's a very strong woman who ended up going on and finishing college and being very successful in her own career, and she did the best she could, right? And that's what I've come to realize. But for a lot of my childhood, I was raised by my grandmother, who, for the first 5 years, right, and you hear all about how important that first five is. I was really raised a lot by my maternal grandmother, and who was also an alcoholic, but who I was very close with over the years. So you compound all of that, and then me just feeling different, as a lot of addicts and alcoholics talk about. over the years, that when the opportunity presented itself to change the way I feel, I took advantage of that. And I actually had my first experience with drugs and alcohol at a very young age. I was like 11, and it was out in Palm Springs on a spring break type of thing with a friend of mine from school. We were in fifth grade. He was with his older brothers and sisters. We were out by a pool, and I remember I drank a like 3/4 of a can of beer of Miller Lite, and I took 2 hits off of a joint. And when you're 11 years old and you're maybe about 90 pounds or 85, I mean, I'm tiny, and you do that, I mean, it has an impact on you. And I will never forget how good it made me feel for about 20, 30 minutes. Like, these older kids were talking to me. They thought I was funny. I mean, it was like the greatest thing that had come into my life at that point. I was like, what is this feeling? I love it, you know? And, um, but as you will see a common theme in my story, it quickly turned on me. And within an hour and a half, I was throwing up and sick and didn't feel good. And I was sent home by my friend's parents because of that. And, you know, and my first experience with pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization as a result of drinking, you know, and, you know, I would like to say that my, drinking career and using career improved after that, but I can just point to situation after situation, and the story we'll talk about later is the culmination of that. But that really was my drinking and using career. And so, you know, fast forward, the first time then that I can now remember drinking alcoholically was when I was 14. I was a freshman in high school now. You know, I was messing around through those other years, but I wasn't drinking alcoholically. Parties or whatever, would experiment and try things, but always wanting to feel different. But I'll never forget, at the freshman football game that, no, I'm sorry, the varsity football game that I was going to with my friends. We had all these big plans to go to the game. And I'll never forget that I had stole a bottle of red wine from my parents from their cabinet. And it was just crappy wine. I mean, it was like, you know, $3 wine. And, but I was so proud of what I got for my friends. And then I'll never forget that they just flat out ditched me. They did not show up. They just went to the game without me. And I'll never forget just the feelings of embarrassment and humiliation that I was just sitting there at home. I had told my parents that I was going off to this game. My parents said, well, when are your friends coming? Where are you going to go? And I was just sitting there just so devastated. And I just like, oh my gosh, like, what am I going to do? And I'll never forget, I just said, you know what, I'm going. And I grabbed that bottle of wine and I went out behind our house and I drank that whole bottle of wine. And granted, I had not grown that much since the fifth grade. I mean, when I went into high school, I was probably 4'11" and maybe 95 pounds, right? I was tiny. And I drank that whole bottle of wine, and that was the first time I drank at something. You know, I was so mad. I was like, F these people, I'll show them. Was really, I remember these feelings. And um, I went and showed up to that game. Now, I mean, I was wasted. I mean, I was out of my mind, drunk, embarrassed myself once again, ended up in the bushes, throwing up, you know, but that was my drinking career, right? Because it made me feel better. It allowed me the courage, you know, they talk about liquid courage they need. But I think back on those times and I realized that there was something just fundamentally different about me, not only about the feelings I was feeling, but just the way alcohol affected me. It affected me differently than my fellows, right? And so I, I, I know there's this genetic component that it just reacts, you know, at a chemical level in my body different, or in my brain, and it just makes me do things that I normally wouldn't do. And I'm not, you know, any kind of half-assed person. I kind of go all the way in on that, and my drinking and using career shows that, you know. And so I continued that, you know, through my high school career. And then at that time, this is the mid to late 80s. Drugs are a big part of my story. I started using cocaine and LSD and mushrooms. I mean, it was just the whole gamut of a lot of different substances, and of course, alcohol was always there. So now, fast forward to the uh, beginning of my senior year, and I'm now selling drugs to support my habit, and I'm just in a bad spot. And December 17th, 1988, I'll never forget that date. I end up getting put into a treatment center by my family. So a week before Christmas, uh, 10 days before my 18th birthday, and 2 weeks before New Year's, I am now sitting in a program in a institution, right? And my first institution. Well, I actually not true. I'd been arrested a few times in before that, but my first long stay in an institution, and it was an adult rehab. And I remember I went in there and uh, had no idea about any type of recovery programs, and you get, at least in this program, we were exposed to 12 steps at that time. And so I went through there, and as I had moved through this program, in these sessions you have with your counselors and with your groups and with your family, they said, like, look, we think your family is very dysfunctional, and we would not recommend you go back. By this time, my mom had remarried. I had siblings, a half brother and a half sister who were 7 and 10 years younger than me, so much younger. I had a stepdad, actually, I had a very good relationship with. He was for all intents and purposes, my father role model. But he and I had, confrontations, got physical at times, things like that, and a lot of it is on me. I provoked a lot of that. But these are the types of things that my behaviors and my alcoholism and drug addiction was leading me to. And so at that time, they said, we don't think you should go home. You should consider a recovery home. And I was too scared to go to a recovery home. But meanwhile, like I talked about earlier, my grandmother, she had gotten sober, and she had about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years at the time. And I kind of did my round two with her, and I went and lived with her. Finished my high school out in kind of an independent study program, graduated, and then I wanted to go to college. But my parents said, there's no way that you're ready to go away to school, and they were absolutely right at the time. Um, and so I'm newly sober, trying to be recovered, but back in the late 80s, there was not a lot of young recovery going on. And I remember, if you were considered young in recovery, you were like under 40, right? You were not a teenager, and which was my story. And I'm sitting here in Newport Beach. All my friends are going off to college, and it's the spring, and they're going to their prom, and they're having all this amazing time. And I'm just feeling like I'm just missing all this stuff. They didn't have the term FOMO then, but I mean, it was FOMO. I just felt like I was just missing all of these things in my life. And so, um, I ended up not being able to stay sober. I was going to meetings, but I jokingly said, some people are on the marijuana maintenance program. I was on this cocaine continuance program where I would get sober for a little while, and then I would go out and do cocaine, and but I wouldn't drink, and it was just a really messed up time in my life for like the first 6 or so months of my early sobriety. And then finally, in June, and I'll never forget that this sobriety date was June 17th of 1989, I recommitted back to the program. And I also know, because that's my mother's birthday, and I had gotten sober again on the 17th. And then I did actually stay sober for a little over 2 years, complete abstinence, no drugs, no alcohol, and stayed clean. I had a job. I went back to school. I was, surfing every day. I had a girlfriend. I mean, like life was really good, at the time. But I also felt like I wanted to do more, and I did want that experience of going away to college. So I had gone to a community college for a year, but then I reapplied to the school that I originally had planned to go to, got accepted and transferred in the fall of 1991 to University of Utah in Salt Lake City. And what's interesting about Utah is what I found it to be is there were basically back then, this is almost 30 years ago, two types of people, either heavily religious, type of people that followed a certain faith, or alcoholics. And as you can imagine, I was able to find the alcoholics quite quickly. I I tried recovery up there a little bit. Wasn't for me, although I would say my effort was subpar at best. But I'll never forget another moment, right? You have these moments of clarity. I talked about the one early in high school. I had another one when I was up in Salt Lake. I got invited to go to a football game, and that was a big social event. It's Division I college football. It's at nighttime, and I'll never forget, Arlena, just the amount of partying that was going on and just how fun it just all looked. And, I had largely, when I had gotten back into recovery that second time, steered clear of a lot of that, and wasn't putting myself in those situations. But now, once again, all these feelings of not fitting in and anxiousness and what am I going to do here had reared their head again. And I'm sitting at this like tailgate where everybody's drinking and seeming like they're having so much fun, and the whole social lubricant concept, it just was there in full display to me. And I was just like, oh my God, if this is how I'm going to feel for the next few years, I'm going to be very miserable, right? And even though I didn't drink or use that night, I know now that's when I relapsed. In my mind, I had emotionally and mentally relapsed. And it was only a matter of time. And it was really a short period of time. It was like a week later that I did, I said the great relapse prayer that all alcoholics say, right? We just pop a drink and then say, F it. And that's what happened. And, you know, when you have a head full of recovery and then a belly full of alcohol that quickly escalated into other drugs as well, the guilt and shame and remorse, at least I felt, was just intense, and it took a long time, and I never really got over it. And then when I would have really bad drunks, it would really come out, emotional breakdowns and things like that. But I went really hard for 5 years, drinking and using, up in Salt Lake City area, and then when I came back to Newport for a long time, and it almost killed me, right? I mean, I was, arrested, running with the laws, back uh, dealing again. I would come to California, get drugs, bring them back to Salt Lake, sell them. I mean, just that was my life, and it was, and I would always try to rationalize those things and say, well, I'm only selling to my friends, and just all the things we do as alcoholics and addicts to try to make ourselves, feel better than, and not have that lower companionship that we were getting dragged down to, right? And that was my life. Um, Now through this time though, I did also meet, a woman up in Salt Lake City who was also going to the school. She and I started dating, but this was as I was kind of winding down my college career. She was a couple years younger than me, but we started dating, and we were dating for about a quarter or so, and then I graduated, and I had made an agreement with my stepfather at the time to come back and start to work for him because he had a construction company, and I would do sales and marketing for him at his construction company. So at the end of 1994, early 1995, I graduated and moved back to Southern California to get involved in a family business. And then I kept this relationship going kind of long distance, which was perfect for me because I could hold it together for the 36, 48 hours that I would see her, every 3 weeks, whatever our cadence was, either me going up there, her coming down here. But then I was available to go do my stuff, while um, when I didn't see her. And this progressively, got worse and harder to maintain. And then meanwhile, my family started to have some really serious issues as well. My parents were, my stepfather and my mother were in the midst of getting a divorce. They were involved in this horrendous lawsuit. And then I decided that I didn't want to be with anyone anymore. So I had broken up with my girlfriend at the time. and and then this really tragic event happened in our family where, as a result of a domestic violence situation, one of my stepfather's cousins was killed as a result of this. And he had a really hard time with this. And he was trying to help this family, and they were back in Utah, but he put me in charge of the company as far as like the fiduciary of like writing the checks and all of this. And so I am at the absolute pinnacle of my disease, and I have full access, to um, these things. And as you can imagine, things went amok pretty quick. Um, and these were things that I had to clean up as I worked through, my recovery, right? And it led to issues with the IRS and things like that, And so now we're getting into like early 1996 as this is happening. And I decided like, oh my God, my life's kind of a mess. Like I gotta get my act together here. What am I gonna do? Well, a couple months earlier, I had crawled back on my knees and begged my girlfriend to forgive me for my, discretions, and she took me back, like she did. And the one I think stand-up thing I actually did do is I went to her parents before and I did apologize for my behavior. So I at least had some moral compass and said, and so they accepted me. But they were this extremely religious family. They didn't drink, they didn't use, they did not understand, dysfunction. They had been married, years, had 5 kids, so it was I was like this just totally alien thing to them, but I did go back and apologize. And then I decided, you know what? I'm going to get married. That is going to change, all these problems that I have. So on Valentine's Day in 1996, I proposed to my girlfriend, made her my fiance, and then she decided that, now because we tried before, she tried to move down before, that didn't work out, and that's when we broke up. She said, okay, now that I've got a ring, I will come back. So that summer, she moved back down to Newport because she was up in Salt Lake, and we were getting ready for our wedding, But now, like, oh my gosh, she's with me all the time, 24/7. Like, how am I going to hide this, right? And like, I think, I thought I was being sneaky before, but I really wasn't. I'd leave to go get, something at the store and come back 3 hours later, loaded, and so things were unraveling fast. We had a big confrontation down in Rosarito, Mexico, where I had, let's just say, taken too many amphetamines and was a little on edge. She called me out on it, and so she was confronting me. I was saying, don't worry about it. I'll never do it again. All the things we say, and this kind of all culminated then as we're moving towards our wedding. And so we're scheduled to get married in September of that year. And, I can tell she's got some concerns, but, I've tried to like say, look, it's going to be okay. We'll get through the wedding. Everything will calm down. So the week of the wedding, people start arriving in from out of town. And I think it's cool now to get married on a Friday. I've heard it's like hip and trendy, but we did that back then, mostly because we couldn't find a place. And so we ended up getting married on a Friday. But the Wednesday before, we have the great idea to have like another bachelor and bachelorette party down in Newport Beach. And then both groups would meet up at the end of the night. Now, if you've ever been down to Newport, Arlena, you'll know that down in the Balboa Peninsula area, there's a ton of bars, like in this square mile around the Newport Pier. There's probably 50 different types of bars and restaurants and things all around the beach. And so there's there's a lot of drinking and partying going on. And so the guys go off, the girls go off, and we end up drinking. We're doing, cocaine at my apartment before we head out. And we get to the bar, we realize what time it is, and we're like, oh, we got to go meet the girls. So, but let's do one last, line before we go. Well, at the time, I have a good friend of mine who was in a bad accident. He was in a wheelchair, and he could not get into the bathroom to do what he needed to do. So we decided to go outside, and as we're walking to the next bar to meet my fiance, we decide that hey, let's stop here near this surf shop, and we'll just do a quick hit here right out front. And as I'm doing that, I have a tremendous amount of cocaine on me. Two police come up on bikes, didn't even see him, hear him on that, and immediately arrest me. And at the time, the laws had just changed. Any amount of cocaine was considered a felony, and I was whisked away and thrown in jail at about 11:30 on Wednesday, the 18th. So and it also turns out that earlier in that summer, I'd had some other altercations with the police. I'm sure you're shocked to hear that, but open container, urinating in public, just a whole different set of things, and I had some warrants out for my arrest. And so it turns out that, I'd been in jail before, and usually gotten released OR, and was going to walk home and figure out my next plan. And I remember asking the guy in the, at the Newport Beach Police Department, I said, hey, like, when do you think I'm getting out of here? And the guy just looked at me and laughed. And he said, you're not. And I'm like, what do you mean I'm not? He's like, you've got a felony charge on you now, and you have a failure to appear, which has gone to warrant. So we're figuring out a way to get you over to county jail so we can hold you over the weekend and then figure out when to get you into court early next week. And I will never forget just the overwhelming feeling of dread and gloom. Like my body just started to like shake, like, oh my God, and I had always prided myself on like this Rolodex of great ideas in my life. Like the A idea didn't work, I'd go to the B idea, I'd go to the C idea. Well, right now this Rolodex is coming up blank on every freaking letter, and I've got nothing. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Because if that happens, I am missing my rehearsal dinner on Thursday. I'm not making it to the wedding. I mean, I'm screwed. And I'm just sitting there. I finally get out of the place where they process you, and I'm kind of put into my cell. I share with some other people that I never forget. Like I have this, I think it was a meth addict in the thing. He's just pacing up and down the jail, making me nervous. And I just don't know, how to deal with this guy. But I finally call my fiance, because it's been several hours now, an hour early into the morning, like 2, 3 in the morning, and she picks up. She's in tears because my other friends who didn't get arrested went down and kind of told her what had happened. and and it's interesting, by the way, and I did leave this part out. On our way up to go do what we needed to do, my mom was driving down the peninsula, and she stopped and she saw us, and she pulled over and she said, you guys look like you could use a ride. Why don't you let me drive you to wherever you need to go? And I'll never forget, I got in a huge fight with my mom in the middle of the street, telling her to get the hell out of here. I don't need, just really awful stuff I said. So she got in the car and left, and I think now, like, you know, obviously that was supposed to happen, right? That's was my higher power kind of starting to come into my life at the time. I didn't know at the time, but so that happened. And then now I'm in jail. I pick up the phone, I call her, and I remember all she said was, Jeremy, what are you going to do about this? And I had no thought of this up until this moment. I had no real cognitive remembrance but I just said, you know what, I'm going to go back to the program and I'm going to get back into recovery. And I'll never forget, I did pull the phone away and I looked down at the handset and just said like, oh my God, what did I just say? And so I am sitting there and like, she says, okay. She's like, well, I got to go because we're trying to figure out what we can do, if we can help you or not. And then she hung up. And then I just sat there for several hours. And what I thought was a great coincidence, my fiance then did reach out to my mom, who talked to my uncle, who's an attorney, and he found a criminal defense attorney in his firm. We had to wait, and that's why it got so late in the morning. They finally, I guess, got my case assigned to a judge, and it turns out that this defense attorney called the judge and said, look, this kid's a knucklehead, he's got some problems, but I'll vouch for him, I will make sure he shows up, will you release him? and I got released. And so this is now, bordering kind of near lunchtime. I don't know, 11:30, 12, I can't remember. It was late morning. And I'm now standing outside of the Newport Beach Police Department waiting for my mom and my fiance to pick me up. There's all these other people who've just been released as well. And then I'll never forget, my mom was a Mary Kay sales director at the time, and she was very successful in that. And she comes pulling into the driveway of the Newport Beach Police Department in her pink Cadillac. And I am sitting there, and I am just getting ruthlessly heckled by these guys over here that are waiting to get picked up, smoking cigarettes, doing whatever. My fiance's in the front seat, and I have to just open the back door and get in the back of this pink Cadillac and just drive off. And like I talked about that first time in Palm Springs, that time at the high school football game, I mean, this was just pitiful and incomprehensible, the demoralization, to the nth degree. And you know, I'll never forget, I get in the car, we get out maybe, 100 yards, and my mom just spins around and just starts unloading on me, and screaming at me and, telling me what a fuck up I am and all of these things. And then she looks at my fiance and she says, and if you don't want to marry him, I completely support that, and just, it was a really bad situation. And so we drive back to my, mom's house at the time. And, now we're like getting in the afternoon. We're supposed to be at our rehearsal thing at like 3:30, 4 o'clock before we go to the dinner, right? And like, so we got like 4 hours to kind of figure this thing out. And my mom looks at my fiance and me and says, "You two have a lot to talk about." And she just kind of left, and we went in. And you know, for whatever reason, my fiance decided that she wanted to go through with the wedding, right? I tried to make, whatever, promises or assurances I could, but I mean, I had no credibility at that point, and it was really on faith that she did that, and once again, I think that was my higher power once again coming in and guiding, and so that obviously ends up being my sobriety date of September 19th, 1996. So we move through. We end up going through with the rehearsal dinner, and then we get married the next day on September 20th, which we share with you guys because I believe you got married the next year in 1997. And so one of the things that I am very blessed is I have one more day of sobriety than I do of marriage, and I hope those two dates never change because we have still stayed married this entire time, and it's been a true blessing. um, and it's been a miracle. Now I am not ever overconfident to say that those dates couldn't change, and I have to work hard on both my recovery, and my relationship. But that is a living amends that I make, every single day to her, because she's been an incredible, amount of strength and inspiration in my life. And for her to go through with that, and by the way, she never told her family because she knew if she did, they would have, I think today, I'm a dad of two daughters now. If one of them were getting married and they came to me and said, yeah, my fiance's in jail on felony drug charges. Like, I mean, I mean, I would have to react differently, but like your average father of a bride would be like, what the, like, no, this thing's over. Like, and that didn't happen, and, my plan really was to figure out how to get the heat off, right? I had the police on me now. I told you about the IRS issues I was having as a result of the things with my stepdad's company. And then now, I had a big marital issues. And you know what? I jokingly say, it's, you know, 23, almost 24 years later, and I'm still looking for a better plan, because the recovery that I've been on has just completely changed my life for the better. I have a spiritual connection now, to a higher power. I'm involved with other men and women in recovery. I try to give back, whenever I'm asked, and where I can, not only to people in recovery, but to other pieces, because I do feel like I owe, because I have been blessed in a lot of things. But none of this happens, Arlena, without, that moment of clarity and that, sobriety. And, in the first few years they were very hard, right? I mean, I was battling a court case. I had to deal with the, trust issues of gain that back of a person that I had hurt deeply. I had all these other amends to make. I mean, just the getting sober part is very hard, right? And I go back to that physical allergy, just the detoxing after so many years of pollution, it takes 12, 18 months. I think people forget that sometimes about the actual physical detox part of the disease that is so hard. I mean, it's at your cellular level and you're trying to extract that, or, we're trying to extract that out of our body. And the only way I know of how to do that is complete abstinence. So you have that plus all the emotional, and so that's how we go. And that's why I'm convinced we didn't end up having kids for 5 years, right? Because I had some growing up to do. I needed to get right. And then we, about 5 years into my recovery, we had our first daughter, and then a couple years later we had our second. Now one's off to college, the other is trying to follow a dream around professional dance. I mean, it's like it's just some amazing gifts have been given to me, things that I would have never asked for or thought. I mean, I just needed to get this court case and my wife off my back and we'd be all good, and then I'd go figure out what I was going to do. But the recovery, the connection to the higher power, the working with others, that is what's brought me to where I am today. So it's been an amazing ride for me. To your point, I've um, been able to have a somewhat successful career in technology, and be able to provide for my family, and then be able to be of service in other ways. So it's been a great ride, not without its challenges, and it still goes on, especially in today's world of pandemics and natural disasters and all the things that are going on. But I do know that it's definitely better than it was. And, I continually try to evolve myself, because I'm not the same person I was, even a year ago. I'm constantly evolving because of my experiences. And the more experiences I get sober, I think the better I am, for my family, for my coworkers, and just for the world at large. So maybe I'll cut it there and talk some questions, and but that's kind of my story of how I got through and kind of where I am. But the recovery has been absolutely the center of my life for the last, you know 23 years and 11 months. So it's been a great ride.
Wow, 23 years and 11 months. That's amazing. Um, I've known you for a long time, but I heard so many different things that I've never heard before. Like when you were talking about like that first football game that you went to where your friends didn't come and get you, like, oh my gosh, that triggered some memories for me too in high school where I was supposed to meet this guy I was crushing on so hard. He was like the star of the football team and he totally ditched me for a
Hmm.
cheerleader.
Yeah.
It was so humiliating. So, I mean, football games are just terrible. I'll just say that.
I mean, just going through high school, and especially
Oh,
now with all the social media, I really feel for the kids and what they have to
yeah.
deal with. And we get ditched like that event, but these poor kids are getting ditched every day on, they call it, ghosted and, all of these
Right.
things on social media. But yeah, I mean, it's hard, right? And when you have the feelings that I did, it just exacerbates it. And then I needed a release valve, and that's really what the alcohol and the drugs were for me.
For me too. I mean, I often say that if I didn't, I mean, I medicated my pain with drugs and alcohol. That was my
Mhm.
painkiller through, those tender years. Did you have like suicidal ideation at all during those years or?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think I was too scared to actually do anything, but I had a lot of nights where I would just wish I would go to sleep and not wake up, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
so,
Just wanting to turn it all off.
correct, I don't ever remember like thoughts of like ending it through and putting a plan
No
together, and
plan.
like
Okay.
nothing like that. But I do
Yeah.
remember like, man, it would, if I didn't wake up, I'd probably be okay with that, and then I'd wake up again, and start out, anew, and it would be another crappy day, right? And so,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. No, those years are brutal. And it sounds like your college experience with the football games didn't improve.
right, yep, exactly.
They do look like a lot of fun. And, I had to go through like, did you have to go through like a mourning period? Like even after everything that happened, and you, that story is so funny about being in front of the jail and all the guys heckling you for getting into the pink Cadillac. It's like that the thought was looking bad in front of those guys, not the story wasn't, I was so worried about what my fiance thought.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the narcissism and the selfish and self-seeking parts of the disease are so prevalent, right?
So
And
funny.
and you're right. I did more. It was probably a good few years into recovery where I would often be like, why didn't I just run when the police showed up? Like they were on bikes, they had these little bike shoes. I could have outrun that. Like that was the thinking, that I
Right.
still had because I was sick, and I
Yeah.
needed, and and then even then I would have, FOMO and things like that,
Yeah.
and it took a while. That's why like, early recovery, it can be hard. It's a lot of work,
For sure.
and because we're retraining our brain,
Yeah.
right, to react differently to different sensory, how to handle things. But that's why, having a group of people, I think, is so important. Whatever, however you choose to recover, is not as important as just making sure you've got a group and you've got people that you can work through and share experiences with, because it's that common shared experience and that common shared recovery, I think, that helps people, and then, I think a lot of people need to supplement with professional help and things like that in order to make it work. But it's so important.
Yeah, I think setting your environment up so that it supports you is huge in recovery. And I think a lot of people, so there's a couple things that happened to me earlier in recovery, and I wonder if this happened to you too, is that I thought the fun was over. I thought I
Hmm.
was never going to have fun for the rest of my life.
Yep.
And then having to transition away from people who were not healthy for me. And I'm sure that, can we say your wife's first name?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure Meredith had her part in like, hey, I don't want you hanging out with those guys anymore. And I don't know how you felt about that, but how hard was it to find a new group of friends?
Yeah, I mean that is definitely an issue, and how do I separate myself? And, part of it was I had naturally removed a lot of the people because they were back in Salt Lake. I still had
Oh,
my
yeah.
friends in Newport, but I definitely cut them out. I knew early on that if I hung around with them, I was in trouble, right? I just knew that, and so I did throw myself into a new job that I had gotten, and being a husband, and then I am a big um, surfer, and so into that, because that was a big release for me. What what I found is, my story is not one of, hey, I accomplished all these things and then my drinking and using got away from me and then I lost it all type of thing, right? I literally, Arlena, was a never was. Like I couldn't get out of
You were
my own
so
way.
young.
I know, but I couldn't get out of my own way, right? I
Yeah.
couldn't even get it good, couldn't even get to college, barely got out of high school, right? And and then you throw that in, and then like most addicts and alcoholics, I had all these big plans and dreams, and I talk about them, and then never did any of that, and
Illusions of grandeur. I am
totally,
familiar.
yeah. And in my recovery, and you talk about the fun, I have done more in recovery around traveling the globe, surf trips with friends, just, doing things that I never thought were possible. And that fun has just blown away. Now, the type of person I am is I'll pray for serenity and then complain that I'm bored, right? And so like I'm still, after all these years, don't always know what's good for me, right? Which
Right,
is why
right.
I continue need to check in with people, right? Check in with you, check in with Bob, check in with people who are important in my life, so that that kind of, we check ourselves before we wreck ourselves, and now I don't I don't emotionally torch my life the way I used to, because even in early sobriety I would do that. I would do
Mm.
stupid things that were like emotional outbursts because I just didn't know how to live
Sabotage.
life. Yeah, I just didn't know how to live life on life's terms, and I would react in the old way, which it was not, now is not really acceptable. And so I see that
Okay.
now, and I'm able to correct it quicker, which has really helped me, I think, in my parenting right now. The good news is my parents have never, I mean, not my parents, my children have never seen me drink. They've never seen me intoxicated or
That's
inebriated,
awesome.
which I'm, very happy for. Now, I need to be careful about that because I once had someone who I really respect say, yeah, Jeremy, but have they ever seen you rage? Have they ever seen you angry? Like, and that's right. They have.
Hmm.
They've seen other alcoholic behaviors
Oh,
that
yeah.
I've exhibited. And so
Yeah, we all
I,
still have a dark side just because we
correct.
get sober.
So
Doesn't
I
go
have to
away.
be able, yeah, and I want these two young women to be strong, healthy, have whatever relationships they enter into their life. I don't want them to feel like it has to be defined by their significant other. I want them to go change the world, right?
Hmm.
And the whole kind of, uh, you know, strong women will change this world, I believe, a lot more in other groups than necessarily
Yeah,
people
you
that
guys have
are,
fucked it
are
all
like
up.
me, right? And so I want to set them up that environment so that they can do whatever they
That's
need to
awesome.
do. And so that has been one of my biggest blessings, is getting to parent these two young women. And now one is gone off to school in Washington D.C., which you remember how
Across the
little she was when
country.
you met. Yeah, and my heart aches because I don't see her every day anymore, but I'm so proud of her, of what she's getting
Hmm.
to go experience, and so it's that. And then my younger daughter's getting some amazing opportunities to live her dreams, and these are
She's a
things that,
ballerina.
yeah, I mean, these are things I could have never even thought of or comprehended when I was out there ripping and running, or when I was
Right.
trying to get sober. I mean, these are just benefits of, over time,
Over time.
suiting up, showing up. And even though I've made a career mostly in sales, what I've learned is that, I think the problem we run into sometimes in sales is we so focus on the results. Did I hit quota? Did I grow? What, all this? But what I've learned is that I am not in the results business. I am in the footwork business. If I do enough of the right things enough times over and over again, the results should come. Sometimes they don't, but they should. And if they don't, then I need to reassess why they didn't, and go, either change my behaviors, activities, et cetera. And that doesn't hold true just in my career, but that's in my life too. If I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm going to keep getting what I'm getting. And if it's a good thing, then I'll keep doing it. If it's a bad thing, then I won't, right? Because the definition of insanity comes up a lot, whether it's in our personal lives, our professional lives, and so I try to be, cognizant of that, and use tools that, like prayer. I'm trying to meditate more now, and do different things to just change that, because our brains need to constantly be retweaked and reprogrammed, or we become, just creatures of habit. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to go back to that old life. you know of course the drinking and the drugging is awful, but just the prison of the mind, I never want to
Right.
be back in that place again. But I know that the substances lead us there, and I know that my brain today is has been programmed enough where it knows, like, oh, Jeremy's not going to drink, but let's make him think like he needs a better job. Let's make him think like he needs a bigger house. Let's make him think, right? That's the insanity of my mind that says outside things will make me feel better. That is core to my alcoholism and addiction still today. And it still rears its head that I think outside issues are going to fix me. When in my heart of hearts, I know, but that 18 inches between the top of my head and my heart, it's a long distance sometimes to go. And so as long as I can keep that, I think I'm in pretty good shape, at least for today. But I am a daily reprieve guy. I believe that I have to maintain, a certain set of, spiritual principles and conditions in order to get that. Because I take nothing to the bank that I will continue my recovery if I don't, work very hard on that every day,
Yeah.
because I've seen it happen. I experienced it myself after, 2+ years. And I don't want to go back to that. An alcoholic death is very tragic to watch, right? You know, I'm 49 now. My dad was 49, died of alcoholism.
Wow.
Okay. His father, 54. And I watched my father in the last 2 weeks of his life hooked up on life support. And basically, although his death certificate will not show alcoholism because of the other things that were going on that ultimately took his life, it is because of the alcoholism weakened his heart so much it got enlarged, it couldn't pump enough blood, and then when he got sick he got taken out by pneumonia. And I'll never
Wow.
forget, the cardiologist came to me and said, is your father a heavy drinker? And I said, yeah, he's an alcoholic. He said, yeah, I can tell. He's got a condition that we see all the time in alcoholics. And he's like, and so, now when that happened, 20 so years ago, I was like, wow, but now I'm that age and I'm like, oh my God, and
That's neck. It
he's
sneaks up on you
got,
quick, doesn't it?
yeah, and he never got to see anything. He didn't ever get to see his grandchildren. I have
Oh,
two sisters on that side. He never got to see them walk down the aisle, their kids. I mean, so it's,
you
and,
missed a lot.
right. I don't want to miss that stuff, and, and now I don't take that for granted. I could, get hit by a bus, but at least I've set myself up to have a better chance to be able to experience those things based on the choices I'm making today, and the,
Yeah,
and the type of life I try to
absolutely.
leave.
Yeah, for sure. I do have a lightning round of questions. I don't know if
Sure.
I did I prepare you for these or not.
I think a couple. Yeah. So let's go.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Steve should be. This is my idea of a good time.
All right.
So, do you have what is your favorite? We call them quit lit books now. The quit literature. Do you have a favorite book that has helped you get sober
Get sober.
or stay sober?
Well, one of my favorite books is it's called A New Pair of Glasses.
Ah,
I do
yes.
I do like that. It was based on a retreat that a person led, and they recorded the retreat and then they documented it into this book, and it's a pretty amazing couple days. And so you can imagine by the title just how do you reframe and look differently at things. So that's always been a big one. And then a lot of just just the craziness in the world right now. A book that I recently, and I actually listened to this one on audio because I'm a big fan of his, it's called Talking to Strangers. It's by Malcolm Gladwell. He has some
Hmm.
amazing
Oh, right.
podcasts and other things, but this one especially really just frames just why our society is having so much trouble working together because of just the way we communicate with each other and how we see each other, and just and so um, that's been one that I read maybe a year ago that was very powerful for me. Maybe yeah, maybe about a year ago. That I've taken to heart, because just there's just a lot of stuff going on in the world right now.
That is the understatement of the year.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, Malcolm Gladwell. Love that guy. Okay. Do you have a go-to quote or mantra that you live by?
Well, I quote a lot because I grew up in the 80s, so I love 80s movies. you know,
You quote movies. Oh my God, Bob and I do that all the time.
you know, but I really am kind of I believe we've got to, trust God, clean house, and work with others. Like that is a recipe for, my success in in recovery, right? I mean, I've got lots of other little funny quotes and things that my wife and I will say to each other, but for the most part, to keep me grounded and centered, it's those three things, right? I've always got to, if I screw up, I've got to quickly
Clean house.
rectify that, and move forward, because the one thing I can't afford is resentments, right? And it's
Right.
usually as a result of me setting wrong expectations, right? So I try, and it's hard in the work I do to not set expectations, but I try to mitigate those, because those are always just resentments under construction, right? And
Yeah.
and then I have to clean a lot more house, which I don't want to do.
Yeah, no kidding.
Right.
Nobody likes making amends.
Right. So, and then the working with others, I feel like I have a responsibility, right? I need to carry the messages, whether it be in my home, whether it be in my work life, whether it be in the community, right? I think people that have been able to gain some sort of success in their life, we need to give back. We have to help those less fortunate. I mean, that is part of us being part of a civilized society, right? There's outside of alcoholism, which is truly based in selfishness and self-seeking. There's too much of that in the entire world. Like, what's in it for me, right? I only believe we move past a lot of these issues when we start to give back more and try to lift the entire community, right?
It's a really good point. Shift that focus
Mhm.
on
Yeah.
helping others. And, it's a great self-esteem building exercise, to be perfectly honest. I feel like service is probably the quickest way to rebuild your self-esteem because it gets so damaged during, that period of addiction.
Yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's awesome. And then the last question is, what is one thing you wish you knew when you first got sober this last time?
Yeah, I would think, well, maybe I wish I knew earlier, because when I was drinking and using, and I'm not sure if you can relate, maybe you can, but just the fear of impending doom, right? Like that always the other shoe was going to drop, like that it was going, that and we talked about the delusions of grandeur. I'd have all these great ideas, and I'm like, okay, and then, but I could never get them to line up, and then something inevitably would go wrong, but it was always me that was screwing it up, right? That was the common denominator, no matter what. Um, but now it's this like knowledge of it will be okay. Like it's not gonna. I think what I had to learn is that like happiness is not the goal, it is a result of what I do, right? And if my goal is to be happy, I'm going to set myself up for a lot of pain and heartache, right? It's about being content. It's about being serene. It's about being comfortable with what I have in my life, not what I want, right? Because otherwise, this happiness becomes this elusive thing. And like I talked about earlier, like, oh, I need that car to make me feel happy, or I need to go on this trip, or, whatever, all the BS that we come to. And so, because the human condition, I've come to believe, is one that there is struggle. We all go through our struggles. My struggles have been heavily based in addiction and alcoholism, but there's people that have all types of other struggles, right? And I haven't walked a mile in their shoes, and I don't know always what they're feeling, but I can be empathetic that they are struggling and they're trying to get through the next thing. And so the thought that everything's going to be okay. It may not work out the way exactly I wanted to or I thought it would, but it will be all right, and we will get to the other side of this thing, whatever it is, right? Right now maybe it's a pandemic, but that, as crazy as it feels in the time and space, we know that it will go away at some point, not when we want it to, not how we want it to, and but so those are some of the things I wish I could tell my younger self, because I would have probably saved a lot of anxious moments, in my early years of sobriety and as a parent, all these things.
Planned Parenthood, right?
Yep.
It's like, oh my goodness. And I love that. There's a quote by Dr. Seuss: "In the end, it'll be okay, and if it's not okay, it's not the end."
Mhm. Yep.
I
Great,
love that one.
great words.
Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for your time. You've been so generous, and I just love you dearly. I knew you would just crush it, which you have. Shared so much wisdom. You're such a great storyteller and speaker, and I know that this is going to help a lot of people. So thank you so much for your service.
Well, it was my honor and privilege, I know we've been trying to do this for a few years now, and
Right?
but you know what? Like I said, I think this was when it was supposed to happen, and I'm glad we got the
Absolutely.
time. And I hope you have a great day. And thanks, Arlena, for reaching out.
Thank you so much. We'll talk soon.
Okay, bye bye.
Okay, bye.